Sponsored by New Orleans Distillers, creators of fine spirits and liqueurs. Through dedication to science, art, and passion, blends of tradition and flavor emerge. For you, always locally crafted. New Orleans Distillers, classically Southern.
Tonight, Social Security checks will be getting bigger by 5.8% next year due to inflation. And that's the good news for those getting checks. But the bad news is inflation will probably eat all of it. The FDA is withholding their decision for the use of Moderna in adolescents due to possible side effects of myocarditis, heart inflation in younger men. And the state of the economy with the editor-in-chief of Forbes magazine. That and more all tonight on Wall Street Wrap-Up. Hi, welcome to Wall Street Wrap-Up. Hope your week went well. I'm Andre Laborde. Our goal is bringing Wall Street to your street for today, for Friday, October the 15th, 2021, and to get you ready for the week ahead. Well, have you tried to fill up your gas tank lately? Maybe you thought of finding out the equity in your home first before topping off your tank. Inflation is eating away at gains you may be making in wages or investments. Well, tonight, we'll be discussing the economy, inflation, the Democrats' proposed $3.5 trillion spending package, as well as the IRS having access to your accounts for any transactions over $600, that and more. Tonight, we'll be talking with the editor-in-chief of Forbes magazine, Steve Forbes. But before we do that, the Dow closed above 35,000 for the first time since September the 8th. All the major averages closed higher for the week. And the Dow Jones Industrial Average ended the week at 35,295. It was up 382 points for the day and up 1.5% for the week. And the S&P 500 closed today at 4,471. That was up 33 points for the day and up 1.8% for the week. And finally, the NASDAQ. They finished the week at 14,897, up 73 points for the day and up just over 2% for the week. The NASDAQ had their best performance in 7 weeks. And this week, Starbucks has been raised by 2 investment companies as a buy. Deutsche Bank raised Starbucks to a buy with a new price target at $127 a share. And Bank of America has raised Starbucks also to a buy at $135 a share. Morgan Stanley rates Domino's Pizza a buy with a new stock price at $560 a slice. Well, my guest this evening is someone you may read his financial columns or read his magazine, which he's the editor-in-chief of, and maybe you've possibly even voted for him when he ran for president twice. Steve Forbes is my guest, and he's here with us tonight. Hi, Steve. Welcome to Wall Street Wrap-Up.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
One of the things that's going in Congress right now is and I'd never heard of a human infrastructure bill, but a $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill that's being whether it stays at 3.5 trillion or a new amount, depending on how much they'll be able to whittle it down. What do you think that's going to be doing for the stock market?
I think the stock market's going to be very interested, not so much in what they call the top line number. As you indicated, that can change depending on what assumptions you use. As you know, that 3.5 trillion or 5.5 trillion or whatever number you want to give to it is a 10-year spending number. So I think the progressive Democrats, after the debacle of not getting the bill through in recent days, is realizing on these new programs they want, you can start them off small, or you can pretend they're going to expire in a year or 2 or 3 and jigger the numbers so that the top line looks small, even if you put in a lot of new stuff that's going to have a profound effect on the economy. So I think investors are going to be looking not so much at the top line number. They know that's pretty much fake, or you can manipulate it 6 ways to Sunday. They want to know what's actually going to be in there. They want to know what new entitlements are going to be in there, if any, what's going to happen with health care, especially expanding Medicare, and especially on the tax side. I think there's growing recognition on the tax side that increasing the corporate tax rate is going to affect real people. Corporations get the money. Economists' research has shown corporations are really tax collectors for the government. They get the money from customers or from lower wages or not paying more dividends. The money comes from somewhere. It doesn't come throughout thin air. So the bottom line is, look at the details. That's what investors look at. And I think that's why the market is having these good days, bad days, treading water, a lot of volatility. They want to see what actually is going to pass.
And I think you're also, and that, if I read you correctly, it's sort of like what even the Wall Street Journal was saying, how that 3.5 presently is actually 4.5 or maybe 5 trillion, because when it comes to entitlements, they're talking about only of having it to expire within after a couple of years. But as we all know, once you start giving an entitlement to someone, it's really hard to take it back. Is that what you're talking of?
That's exactly right. Ronald Reagan once said that the closest thing to immortality on this earth is a government program. They, one way or the other, they live on forever.
The latest line from the administration and even from Nancy Pelosi is that for anyone making under $400,000 a year, it's going to be free. It will be and I'll use their term, zero cost. Do you think that's going to sell with the American people?
I think that sounds like some of those late night ads. If we got a great deal for you, and wait, there's more. And
right.
Again, with those numbers, again, in terms of companies collecting taxes, where are they going to come from? Customers, and customers are people also making below $400,000 a year. And in terms of fewer wage increases, and tens of millions of people have 401ks, IRAs, they're going to be affected as well. And so then you look at capital gains, you look at increasing the income tax for higher income earners. A lot of businesses are what they call pass-through businesses. And so their tax burden is going to be going up, and they've ignored that one. And they're also going to take away from small businesses a 20% credit they got in the 2017 Tax Act, which is also going to increase their costs, which will affect their customers and people who work for them. So these things have very real consequences.
You've been around Washington for a long time, and you even ran as your presidential race. Do you think, so you understand the pressures that I would imagine someone like Kyrsten Sinema or Joe Manchin are experiencing from not just the Democrat Party, but I would imagine from the mainstream media. Just out of curiosity, do you think that they can withstand the pressure?
Well, I think some of it is so over the line, not allowing Senator Sinema even going into a restroom without being accosted by angry activists really turns off people. And Senator Manchin's been very careful. We'll see how he goes ahead. But in that memo that he wrote and Chuck Schumer, the Senate leader, signed last July, where Manchin made very clear what his top line number is, and also made clear that with Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid all in financial trouble looking out 5 to 10 years down the road, bringing on new entitlements, he said, would be fiscal insanity. So I think he's put on, and then he also released a statement a week ago saying the same thing. So I think that he's pretty well dug himself in. I think Senator Sinema, who wants to be the new John McCain, maverick from Arizona, I think she'd be hard-pressed unless they made very real concessions. And so while the progressives are saying, we will change the top line, I think, again, Sinema and Manchin and others, especially investors, are going to be looking at what are the details.
True.
That's what counts.
Steve, I always thought the mainstream media liked mavericks from Arizona, but for some reason, this particular maverick doesn't sit well with them.
Well, yes, it depends on where you're mavericking.
That's exactly. If you're maverick on the Republican aisle to cross over to the Democrat side, that's okay. But if you're doing it the opposite way, that's a definite no-no.
That's right, and especially costing her on an airplane. I mean, an airplane, you don't want somebody yapping in your ear about something. Enough already.
I think so, too.
Maybe they should put muzzles instead of masks on some of these passengers.
That's true. Very good point. And I understand exactly. I think that with public perception, that even for people who don't keep watching the news on a nightly basis, that when they see something like that, there are certain areas of privacy a person needs, and when you go into those areas and bombard them like they did for Kyrsten Sinema, I think this may have a negative effect on there. Steve, what about the Biden administration just recently nominated, and I think I'm pronouncing her name correct, Soleil Omarova, and as the new comptroller of the currency. Well, what really struck me, and to be honest with you, I had never heard of Soleil Omarova. I'd never heard of her. But what did strike me was that she's a graduate of the University of Moscow. And not only that, but she went there on a Lenin scholarship. So now, I'll be honest with you, I don't know how their team is doing this year, and I don't know if the University of Moscow has a good quarterback, but what does it say for the comptroller of the currency to be someone who is stating, and even to now, saying that the banking system of the United States should look more like that of the Soviet Union? Should we be worried?
Well, she said the other nice things about the Soviet Union, such as that equal pay. Problem is, the pay in the Soviet Union was fake. The old saying in the Soviet Union was, we pretend to work and they pretend to pay us.
That's right.
It was all a rationing system. I mean, you combine that with the proposal to have the IRS examine your bank accounts. If you do more than $600 in transactions each year, they're going to snoop without any cause whatsoever. There goes your privacy. People are concerned about privacy from these big tech companies. What about the IRS snooping on every little thing you do? That's aimed at small businesses, not big businesses. It's aimed at regular people, not the so-called rich. And so I think that's going to backfire as well.
Just as you brought up, there are certain things that will catch the American public's attention, like when we talked about Kristen Sinema, where they were accosting her at, verbally accosting her at. But something like making the IRS be able to access every bank account for anyone with $600 transactions, and that's also, by the way, within a year. So that's going to be, I think there's all of us is going to be, even for the person that will go, well, other people will pay taxes, other people will do it. But now all of a sudden, this is something that they're going to be looking at. Do you think this may be something that will be registering with enough Americans to contact their congressman?
Yes, and this is the thing, and this is what I think people are getting more offended at, is the Democrats are rushing through these massive bills with things like that IRS provision in there, numerous new entitlements, massive increase in government control of health care without proper debate, without proper deliberation. What are the consequences of this thing? What are the implications of it?
The debt ceiling is also is a topic right now, which they want the Republicans to have fingerprints on it. So what they're saying is that it can't be done without the Republicans. But is that true?
Absolutely not. The whole point of reconciliation is you can do it with a simple majority. The last we looked, they have a majority in the House. They have a bare majority in the Senate, but they do have a majority. So if the party's for it, they can get it. And what they worry about with reconciliation are two things. One is during the process of raising the debt ceiling, members can propose amendments from both parties. And those amendments can be politically embarrassing, and the Democrats don't want that. And so, as you also indicated, they also want the Republican fingerprints. People are equating this binge of spending from Washington and proposed binge spending with rising prices, with inflation. That's a political loser. So the Democrats want to say, well, the Republicans are part of it, too. And the Republicans are not going to go along with it.
Do you think that the Republicans, that they will stand together with all 50 U.S. senators and not go along with that? Or do you think that one or two will start caving?
I think they can get most of the 50 Republicans in the Senate. Last count, there were 46. And for a filibuster, you need 60 votes. So the Republicans can block it even if they don't get every Republican to go along with it. And so that means they're going to have to use reconciliation, a simple majority. And so, again, the Republicans have the perfect answer. You control the Congress. You want the debt ceiling raised? Go ahead and do it. In terms of the default, the government still is collecting taxes and fees, not enough to pay all of Uncle Sam's bills, but more than enough to pay the debt on the national, on the bonds. And so there's no reason for a default. If there's a default, it's because the White House decided to do it, not because they ran out of cash. And same thing with Social Security payments. There's enough money coming in to continue those payments for a long, long time to come. So those are political decisions, not we don't have any more money decisions.
Steve, that's an excellent point, because I read where every month the federal Treasury takes in approximately $340 billion per month, and service on the debt is approximately $44 billion. Well, when you subtract 44 billion from 340 billion, you still have excess over. Now, of course, counting all the other expenses that the U.S. government has, then that's where they spend more than they take in. But just as you were mentioning, the service of the debt is 44 billion a month compared to 340 billion coming in. So I guess that's what you're talking about, right?
Exactly. They have the money to pay the interest. And they also, when a bond comes due, they're allowed to refinance it. It just can't go above a certain level. On Social Security, as you know, the trust funds have about $3 trillion in reserves. We all know in a few years they're going to start to run those reserves down because of the way they have mishandled it, but they still have $3 trillion. Why can't they use that to make monthly payments until the government reopens if we get government shutdown? The answer is, only Washington can get away with this, is those reserves are non-marketable government bonds. Now, can you imagine a private company with its pension plan saying, we're going to put non-marketable IOUs from the company in the pension plan and get away with that? No way.
Steve, if you or any other company executive would be trying that as what they're doing, you would have been put in the same jail cell that Bernie Madoff was used to be held in. But because it's the federal government,
and the food is no good either. So,
like the old joke, the two guys were talking in prison, and one prisoner was talking to the other, saying, "You know, this food here is terrible," and the other prisoner says, "Yeah, it was a lot better when I was governor." So that's very true. We're going to take a break right now.
Sounds like Illinois, yeah.
Just like Illinois. So true. Rod Blagojevich, so true. We're going to take a break. We're talking, if you're just joining us, with the editor-in-chief of Forbes magazine, Mr. Steve Forbes. We're so happy to have him. We're going to take a break, but don't go away because we'll be right back. Welcome back. We're talking with Steve Forbes, and Steve is the editor-in-chief of Forbes magazine. The Federal Reserve, it has low, I think basically 0 to 25 basis points for interest on the debt, but it looks like they're going to be raising that pretty soon. First off, I'm just curious, do you think that because he's getting pushback from Elizabeth Warren and other progressives, do you think the president will renominate Jay Powell as chairman again for Federal Reserve chairman?
There's been a lot of speculation that Powell might not be reappointed because of opposition from the far left of the Democratic Party. But the answer to that is, who would you replace him with? And could that person make it through the Senate? That's the bottom line.
True. In fact, you brought up about inflation, which is a good segue. But the question I wanted to get to is that I've talked to economists and also business leaders, and sometimes I've gotten two different areas. Do you think the inflation we're having right now, we're experiencing, do you think it's temporary, that it's just because of bottlenecks, or do you think it's more long-lasting and here to stay? Your thoughts?
Well, a part of it is what happened with the pandemic and under appreciation of when you shut the global economy down, not to mention the U.S. economy, highly intricate supply chains and the like. You just don't turn it on like a light switch or a faucet. And so it takes time to undo the damage of a pandemic lockdown. And that's what they underestimated. So that's a good part of it. However, during 2019 and 2020, the Federal Reserve was creating too much money. And the proof of it was, you look at commodity prices, especially the gold price, went up about 50%. Now, this year, the Fed has been printing a lot of money, but it's been engaging in a very tricky thing, a real scheme. The Fed buys $120 billion of bonds each month, which creates more money out there, but then it borrows the money back through a device called reverse repurchase agreements. In essence, they borrow it back short term, 3 days, 5 days, overnight money. Mm-hmm. Now, in February, the amount of these so-called reverse repos, the gimmick the Fed is using, the tool the Fed is using, was zero on their balance sheet. Now, today, it's $1.2 trillion they're using in this scheme to prevent a blowout on the money supply. Now, how long can they do this? Especially if Washington does pass some more spending bills, that dam eventually is going to break. So you're not only going to have supply chain disruptions and rising prices, but also the old kind of classical monetary inflation, just sheer printing of too much money, which will hit the economy 6 to 12 months a year down the road, 2022, 2023, which is not going to put the Democrats in a good place going into the 22 midterms or the 24 presidential election when you have a stagnant economy and rising prices. But if the Democrats get all their way on the taxes and the spending, they're going to be in deep trouble, not only in 2022, but especially in 2024. So the activists in the party would never acknowledge it, but Joe Manchin and Senator Kyrsten Sinema, are doing the party a favor.
He's sort of like the keeping the keys of the liquor store away from the alcoholics. It's for their own best interest, but they're not feeling it at this particular moment. There's a lot of cargo and a lot of shipping that is not being able to be getting to Long Beach, the LA ports, New Orleans ports, a lot of major ports that are not able to go. And we're already in October. Well, Christmas season and holiday season is just around the corner. With cargo not being able to be transported the way it is, do you think that this is going to be a slower season for retailers?
Yes, and what this might lead to is knowing that you're going to have a hard time getting supply when all of your suppliers are telling you, I don't think you can do it, is they're going to over-order, ordering maybe 2-3 times as much, figuring, well, if I get at least a third of it, I'll be okay. But eventually those bottlenecks will be dealt with. Eventually we're going to get more truck drivers in the months ahead. And so you're going to have those distortions from these shortages really hit the economy hard as people overorder.
There's between $4 to $5 trillion in cash reserves that are sitting in people's cash reserve accounts, checking accounts, and such. So you've got this excess cash, and a lot of that is coming from government stimulus money or being locked down for the last year because of the COVID pandemic. So here you've got this excess cash heading into Christmas season. Well, normally that would be a retailer's dream come true, but if you don't have the products to sell, you can't make the transaction. So
that's right. Or you're going to pay up more for it, which means rising prices, which also leaves people in an uncharitable mood.
Do you think the chip shortage that's going on right now, I mean, today you can't make a cup of coffee in the morning from a Mr. Coffee Pot without having microprocessing chips and such, and it's showing up in car prices, used cars now. It's on you can't go in and negotiate with a car salesman because he's got the upper hand if you want the car. Do you think this chip shortage is going to be lasting into 2022?
I think it will be lasting in 2022. Again, when you shut down a foundry, making a chip is a very complicated, sophisticated process.
Steve, what about EVs, electric vehicles? You know, the fossil fuel industry is getting it from all sides right now because the administration has made no bones about that they want to do away with fossil fuels. Well, General Motors is saying that they want to be either all or almost selling all electric vehicles by 2035. Well, we're almost in 2022, so that's only 13 years from now. Do you think that we'll actually be changing to electric vehicles in that fast of a time, or is that just wishful thinking?
I don't think. I think you're going to see what you might call a hybrid. I think we're going to still have the internal combustion engine out there, and just because it's nice to say electricity. There are two problems with EVs. You know, some of them are wonderful cars. Tesla, delight to drive. But one big problem is, unlike gasoline, where you go in for 5 or 10 minutes and fill up the tank, that takes hours to recharge a lot of these vehicles. So it's not like a quick charge up. So that puts a lot of constraint on. And then where do you get the electricity? It's not going to be from so-called renewables. You got to get it from a lot of it from fossil fuels, at least 80% of it on so-called alternative energies is now using massive amounts of coal because guess what? The sun isn't always shining and the wind always isn't blowing. Hello?
And how do you think things will shape up for the 22 midterms?
Well, this is where the Democrats have to be worried. First of all, as we know, historically, the party that occupies the White House usually takes a hit in the midterm elections, especially in the House. And you combine that, though, this time with rising prices. That's inflation, and that is what people are very, very angry about, especially when they see this blowout spending. Slower economy is not going to hurt. The Afghan defeat is left a bad taste in people's mouths and also has very real consequences for our security. You have the open border situation where the White House says, oh, that's just seasonal, when you have literally hundreds of thousands of people coming in illegally and they're spreading them around the country without proper debate. It would be one thing if these people were legal, but they're not. And so that is going to hit states like Texas and Arizona, where Arizona has a Senate seat held by the Democrats coming up in 2022.
Unfortunately, the clock doesn't stop.
Well, thank you very much. And you're right, the clock never stops.
Thanks a lot, Steve. My thanks to Steve Forbes. Well, if you've got a question about finance or a comment about the show, we'd love to hear from you. You can always write us at andre@wallstreetwrapup.info. Keep it pithy or concise. We'll be glad to answer your questions. And now for a look ahead for next week. But first, on this day, October the 15th, back in 1878, what company was founded that still is in existence today? What company is it? Well, we'll have that answer in just a moment. Well, on this day, October the 15th in 1878, this company was founded that is still in existence today. What company is it? It's General Electric. Founded by Thomas Alva Edison and originally named Edison Electric Company, in 1889 it was renamed Edison General Electric Company. When it was founded on this day in 1879, by the way, there were 3,000 shares listed for $100 per share. That's quite a lot of money back then. In fact, $100 a share, that's a market cap of about $300,000. The whole company, General Electric, for $300,000. But happy birthday to GE, 143 years old today. And we've got a lot of other things coming up too. Coming up in the next week, we'll be talking about Wall Street reporter from the Wall Street Journal reporter Tim Higgins. Tim has written a great book called Power Play. It's a very interesting book about Elon Musk and how Tesla led the way with electric vehicles and now is a stock valued at over $800 a share. Tesla has made Elon Musk the richest man in the world, taking over Jeff Bezos, who was number one, now he's number two. Brother, can you spare a dime? As a reminder, we repeat the show on Sunday mornings, but the best way is to set your DVR so you'll never miss an episode. And that's our show for Friday, October the 15th, 2021. I hope you enjoyed it. My thanks to Steve Forbes for joining us this evening, but as always, my special thanks is to you for allowing us into your homes tonight. Remember, you can always follow us on all the social media. We're on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and WYES.org. So may you have a fun weekend and a productive week ahead. I'll see you next week. For Wall Street Wrap-Up, I'm Andre Laborde. And remember, money never sleeps. Good night.
Sponsored by New Orleans Distillers, creators of fine spirits and liqueurs. Through dedication to science, art, and passion, blends of tradition and flavor emerge. For you, always locally crafted. New Orleans Distillers, classically Southern.